Perfect. Hi everyone. My name's Romain. I'm a developer advocate on the Android team, and today we're going to be doing our weekly developer hangout focusing on UI, graphics, and animation. And in order to be able to answer those questions a little more effectively, I'm joined by Romain and Chet, who are on the framework team for Android and are the best possible people to answer your questions. So we've got a bunch of moderator questions, hopefully, and a few people live on the Hangout. It's frozen on our end, so hopefully it's not frozen on your end. I'm going to check on that shortly. So what we're going to do is start with the moderator and then take questions from people in the Hangout as well. Thanks. So.
Are we going to share some audio feedback so that we actually know that people are there?
I hope so. So I'm going to check the first question here and let you guys answer that. And in the meantime, I will take that opportunity to make sure that everything is actually working. So the first question is there some sort of UI design and style guideline in work to solve problems like something referenced somewhere else so that developers inside and outside of Google can work towards a common user interface patterns?
That's a very easy answer. I'm working on it.
Okay. Working on it. Cool. Yeah, we are starting to move a little bit. Okay, next question. When scrolling through lists or grids, there is always an initial stutter, e.g. the app drawer in RCS or the Android market. Second time around, it is always smooth. Is there any kind of pre-caching we can do to remove this in our apps?
So that one is really weird because I don't remember seeing such a stutter in our lists. I couldn't understand why you can be seen in the launcher because of the layers, but a normal list should not do that, especially on ICS. So please send us a repro case or use TraceView. Let us know what's going on, and we'll take a look and fix it.
Yeah, is this a problem in your application when you use these controls?
No,
or
it seems to be that see Android market or.
Yeah, maybe there's something specific going on in particular applications.
Yeah,
but there's nothing generically that would cause that.
So let us know where and how we can reproduce those problems, and use TraceView, and we'll try to figure out what's going on.
Okay, it does seem to be working. So hopefully we're not talking to no one. Is there anyone on the live stream which would like to ask a question? You've got a very professional looking mic. I'd love it if you used it. Trey. Oh, cool. Thanks for joining.
Yes, sir. Oh, well, you don't have to say that, but thanks.
Cool. Okay. Let's see. What's the next question we've got is, the animation framework seems a bit disjointed, with animations being specified in XML files, layout files, code, etc. Has any thought gone into building an interface, prototype, and build animations?
You want to answer that one?
Yeah, I answered it online already, at least partially, and then there's a follow-up to it, which I'll have to read. I actually don't see the problem that's described of, well, you've got different ways to create animations. That's actually by design. I like the idea that you can dynamically create stuff on the fly if you need to, or if you're more comfortable at that level. I also really like the idea with both UI controls and layouts as well as animations that you can declaratively create stuff beforehand that's not dependent upon runtime variables.
I think the real question is like, are we working on a visual tool actually to create animations?
Yeah, but I mean, this seemed to be the problem that we would address with a visual tool, which I would disagree with. Yes, we're working in a visual tool. We obviously have some visual tools out there. They are not complete yet. There is an understanding that we need to work more on that and make things that are better and more intuitive. There was a question, I don't know if this was it. Oh, there was another question that I got, I think on a Google Plus post or my blog about whether we would create graphical tools to allow you to draw paths and have animations along those. I think that's probably not the first kind of problem that would need to be solved in our UI.
Yeah, that seems it would fit in that kind of visual tool. Right? That's the kind of feature you might want. Maybe not at first.
Right. Yeah, sort of a follow-on. As these things get richer, we could look at. We could certainly envision adding more capabilities like that. But we've got large problems to solve.
Yeah. Right, so yeah, summary of the answer. Yes, we want a visual tool. No TA, no promise, no nothing. as usual, I guess.
As usual.
But
You want promises, you've come to the wrong place.
Yes, but it's something we've been thinking about, and we already have kind of a tool in the visual editor in ADT. You can play an animation from an XML animation onto any view, so you can at least test really quickly your animations without having to push your app onto your phone and play with the app. It helps a little bit.
Okay, so it seems we're having issues with getting appropriate audio, which is a real shame, but we have attached a mic to the bug droid, so I'm going to give this to Romain to
So it's a mic droid.
It's a mic droid, exactly.
Yeah, move closer, Chet. Oh, just lean forward.
Okay.
But yes, so you guys are talking more, so shift it closer to you. And
Yeah.
that will help. We are working on slightly more permanent solutions. We will keep
Maybe a wireless mic.
Yes, indeed.
You can tell that Google is really high-tech.
All right, while Romain plays with that, I'll move on to the next question. Do you folks plan to have better image manipulation UI APIs so we don't have to do these weird NDK hacks to load up full-size images and then use OpenGL to show parts of those images in an Android UI window? Like image viewing Instagram and sort of
Yeah, so we partly have a solution in ICS. We have a new package. I don't remember the exact name, but we have new image effects. For instance, when you go to the photo editor or in the camera application, now you can apply filters like, Lomo or vignettes. You can fix highlights and shadows. That's all part of a public API that you can use in your own application today. And under those pre-built effects, we have a richer framework that will let you, in the future, create your own filters. So we're still working on the API. We don't quite know if it's going to be using the GPU or the CPU or if it will do it automatically for you. But we will take advantage of the hardware, so we'll use multiple cores when it makes sense, the GPU when it makes sense. It might be using RenderScript, it might not, but we're definitely working on an API for that. And I'm really excited because I take a lot of photos, and I really want to see more powerful photo editors that can work on high-resolution images with more filters, and that will definitely help getting those applications on market.
And so this is the Android.media effect.
Yeah, on Android.media.effects. Yeah, that's a good starting point in the documentation.
Is there any reason I should choose to use Surface View over Texture View? It seems not, but Surface View has not been deprecated, so I assume there must be some overhead in allowing Texture View to exist as a normal view. Okay, that could be a long answer. So the big difference between Surface View and Texture View is when you use a Surface View, we have to cut a hole through your window, and we put a second window behind your application, and that's where your Surface View really is. So the problem with that is you cannot animate the surface view, you cannot change its alpha, so you cannot fade it in. If you try to put it in a scrolling container, it's not going to work. But it's really efficient. You can render directly into that surface view. There's no overhead associated with it. It's extremely fast. If you use a texture view, on the other hand, you can move it, you can scroll it, you can rotate it, you can animate it, you can fade it. It's really cool. It behaves like any other views in the system. The disadvantage of texture view is we have to do an extra copy. So you render into the surface texture, and then we have to take the result and copy it basically into the texture view. It's slightly slower. In most cases, it should not, but it helps you create better UIs. You also can apply visual effects onto the texture view by supplying a pane, so you can apply color filters. Or if you know OpenGL, you can apply your own shaders. So there's no real answer. It depends on your application. You have to test. If texture view is fast enough, use texture view. If you're writing a game, don't use texture view. Cool. Okay. I'll ask Razul, you've just joined us on the live stream. Did you have a question you'd like to ask in person?
Yes, it's a general question. It's about UI tools and how tools for developing UIs are you all using, especially the Google developers? Are you coding it all that, I don't know, with XML and native, or are you using tools?
We use our brain.
That's exactly.
More seriously, we use, I mean, especially our app developers, because we work on the framework, so we don't really work on applications directly. But most people here write either the XML directly by hand, or they use the SDK tools, so ADT. So we use the same tools that you guys have.
Okay.
And usually in some of the tools we created, for instance, stuff like TraceView or ArcView were created because someone on the team needs something to help them do their job, and then we just add it to the SDK so everybody can use it. So we have the exact same tools. And actually, most of the time when you use the SDK, you have access to more tools than we do because...
Oh, okay. There's no magical tool for you all.
No.
Okay.
We would share it with everyone else. Believe me.
Okay.
Also, it's worth mentioning that we also have UX people who design what applications should look like, and they use all the traditional tools that you would be familiar with for drawing and animation and stuff like that. But that has nothing to do with actually making the applications work. That's more about designing what they should look like.
Yeah.
But that's just a typical workflow between design and development.
Oh, cool. Oh, thank you very much.
So we've got a question from David Gerber in Switzerland, and he wonders, why were fading edges removed by default in Android 4.0? Is it discouraged to use them?
So there are two reasons for that. The first one is the new ICS look does not work really well with the fading edges. We have this cleaner look, it's sharper, we have a lot of really sharp edges, and we have fewer visual effects that we had in the past. For instance, in Honeycomb we still had a lot of glows and shadows, and we don't really have those anymore in SCS. So fading edges didn't work really well in SCS, so we removed them for that reason. And the second reason was on some architectures, on some GPUs, fading edges are extremely expensive to render, at least with the current implementation, and that was affecting the frame rate. So we decided to prefer the smoothness of the UI over fancy visual effects. So in your application, if you're running on SCS, I would suggest that you do not use the fading edges, just because it looks better, but also because it's probably more efficient. But as usual, give it a try. In some cases, they're completely fine. You can still enable them if you want, but you'll have to try to make sure it doesn't impact your application in negative ways.
I would say, as far as looking better, part of looking better is looking consistent. So if you want to look like a normal part of the rest of the user interface on the device, it's nice to actually match those design
trends. Next question is from is the one which we just answered. So I'm going to skip past that and move on to Brian from Austin, who asks, in Android 3.0 and above, how do you obtain the position of a view relative to the screen after it's scaled? So if you're using view.setScale xy. For example, how to keep a draggable view that's scaled twice from being dragged off the screen. Get location on screen returns the same value irrespective of scale.
So I believe the answer is you don't, because there was a bug that we fixed recently.
Bug.
Jill fixed that.
Oh, I don't remember the scale bug.
Yeah. It was it's a bug.
Okay, but part of the problem, there is a fundamental issue unrelated to any bugs that may or may not be on the platform ever, which is that those properties are post layout. So all that get location on screen knows about, or left, right, top, bottom, is basically the ideal location where the layout has placed the view. If you then rotate the view, or you scale the view, or you translate X or translate Y the view after that, that's post layout. And the layout doesn't know anything about it, and the location on the screen has no idea what's going on there. So you basically need to query for those values and then do the inverse scale, or the scaling operation yourself to see where the thing is actually going to end up.
And I see that Trey just released his first Android application, so congrats. It's pretty awesome. You'll have to let us know what the app is. I want to take a look at it.
Yeah, actually,
Sure.
Do you want to tell us briefly maybe what your app does?
Yeah, this is an app for fans mostly, and it has several hundred high-res photos that go by in sort of a slideshow. So it works great on all Android devices, and Google TV is mostly where we've been kind of have this non-stop gallery of photography going by.
You had a question about 3 weeks ago about like how many bitmaps you could have loaded simultaneously for thumbnails. Is that right?
Yeah, that might have been my developer. It was a really nice guy named Dagfin, who's kind of a fan, and so he's been doing all the work on this app. I don't do anything. I just take the photos. And although I did spend a good 2 hours inside your developer console today trying to put all the metadata together and get the screenshots uploaded and all that good stuff. That's about all I did, though.
Nice.
Yeah, we'll have to take a look at it.
Definitely. We'll definitely check that out. We'll have to get your developer on one of these hangouts as well, and find out what sort of challenges he had.
Yeah, we should do a
getting
hangout
this
with people who work on photo apps or photographers who can
Nice.
focus things.
Great idea.
Yeah, we're also building some camera apps right now. Those take a lot longer. We've got a bunch of camera apps for iOS, so it's been a hard road to build these things for Android, but we're committed to it. I'm an Android user, so I love it. So I want to make it for me, if nobody else.
That's always the best kind of app.
Yeah.
We are too. We're Android users. I think all of us are.
I think-
Yeah, really.
So yeah, as a reminder for me for later, can those of you who are watching who are photographers or app builders building apps around photography and images, ping me and I'll invite everyone to a hangout in the next couple of weeks. We can sort of discuss in more in depth the sorts of technology and challenges and solutions around that sort of app design. That'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's love it.
Okay, let's see. What's the next question we've got here? Right.
RenderScript.
RenderScript has great uses. That's very true. Is RenderScript likely to stick around for a while? Yes.
Let me tell you a secret about public APIs and libraries, is that when that API is out there, it does not go away. And this is a very good thing for developers. It's a very painful thing for the library developers.
Yeah, and that's actually why we had the RenderScript technology in the works for about 2 years before we made it public. Is because we wanted to make sure that we got it right before we gave access to it for everybody. So yes, it's going to be around for a while.
So yes, is there any way to tell what hardware is being used at runtime? That is, can I tell what GPU and CPU resources are actually being leveraged on the device?
So at the moment, one of the goals of RenderScript is to be able to do heavy processing using either multiple cores on the CPU side or using the GPU. And actually, yesterday, we published a great article on d.android.com where we show an example of an image filter. So it's to apply gamma correction and levels, the same kind of levels you have in Photoshop. We show how to do that in RenderScript using multiple cores. So on the Galaxy Nexus, it's really, really fast because we can use like all the resources we have at our disposal to apply the filter. And it's very easy to write, so you should go take a look. So currently in ICS, RenderScript can only use the CPU. We have not taken care of running RenderScript on the GPU yet.
This is for compute.
This is for compute, yeah.
Right. Rendering happens on the GPU.
Yeah, so if you're doing rendering, if you do any kind of drawing, it happens on the GPU. But if you're doing processing, like you're applying an image filter, you just want to modify the image, that happens on the CPU. So we're working closely with hardware vendors and the graphics teams how that work on it, and we want to have a GPU solution. Now the question is, will you be able to tell if you're running on the CPU or the GPU? The answer is we don't know yet. We're taking our time to get it right. We want to make sure the APIs are easy to use. If it makes sense to let you know that you're using the GPU or the CPU, we'll have an API for that. But in particular, I think our goal is that you should not have to decide. Android runs on a variety of platforms. We have very different CPUs, very different GPUs. We don't want you to have to choose, because maybe running on the GPU on one phone is better, but then on another phone it will be worse than using the CPU. So we want to be able to do that automatically for you as much as possible. So we're thinking about solutions that we could use to make that happen in the best way possible. So stay tuned.
Nice. Next question is about hardware acceleration. What is the best way to disable hardware acceleration for an application and maintain less than Android 3.0 support? Android hardware accelerator requires min SDK version to be at least 11. Disabling it by view causes black shadows of overlaid views on my Surface feed.
Don't overlay views on top of the surface view.
Yes. No, but the question, so if you want to disable hardware acceleration and maintain pre-3.0 support, instead of using min SDK version in your manifest, you use target SDK version. So when you use target SDK version, it gives you access to all the APIs you have in that version of the SDK, but your app can still run on previous versions of the platform. It's just up to you to make sure that you don't use the APIs that are not available on the platform that you're currently on.
Perfect. And that's a good point as well that that Chet made, which is you shouldn't be putting things on top of your surface views.
I mean, you can, but it's expensive.
Yeah, very expensive. We've got a couple. Thanks for joining us, Trey.
Yeah, thanks, Trey.
We've got a couple more people in the live stream. I want to give you guys an opportunity to ask your questions live. So either of you guys, Tickets, Arfit and Mister, if either of you guys have questions you'd like to ask, please fire away.
Hello. I have a question regarding the camera also. To disable the shutter sound, the only way I found is to silent the phone completely, and this is very intrusive, but I found no other way. It could be a legal thing, but we have to suppress the shutter sound.
I think there are legal reasons in some countries.
Yeah, exactly. I think that it's on purpose that you can't silence the shutter unless the phone is entirely silenced. So I don't think there's an API way of changing that.
I mean,
yeah, but I can silent the shutter when I put the whole phone in silent mode. So this workaround is used at the moment, and so it's done anyway. But it could be done less intrusive, because now everything is silenced.
Yeah, so I think it's done. Purposefully intrusively, if that makes sense. So that it's supposed to be very obvious when you've muted the shutter sound by having muted the entire phone. I think apart from anything else, you want to avoid rogue apps taking photos of things without you being aware of it. Obviously not be.
But there's that, and also it was like other people. If you take pictures of other people, like I think in some countries you have to have the shutter sound so that they are aware it's open.
Okay, thanks for the info.
Sure, go.
Can you guys hear me?
We can.
Hi. So I had a quick question. I've started working on a project that requires basically that involves multiple Android devices that could conceivably come to it's kind of like a meeting thing, like a go-to meeting kind of thing. But is there a good way to kind of connect or discover multiple Android devices or apps, or even we're going to code something custom, but is there any kind of system that could help connect with another Android phone?
Would that be Wi-Fi direct?
Yeah, it depends on what version of the framework you're running. So the best way of doing that would be using Wi-Fi direct, which is an ice sandwich API. And that lets you do basically exactly what you're describing, sort of set up a bunch of devices so that they can create an ad hoc signature. If you're running devices sooner than ice cream sandwich, then you're probably going to need to use Bluetooth, assuming that you don't want to go through sort of an internet sort of based solution. Bluetooth is probably going to be your only other option.
Is Wi-Fi direct only part of Android 4.0?
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Also, so the phone, I believe, is initiating Wi-Fi device after Android 4.0, but the other ones.
Oh, interesting.
That's true. Yes. I'm going to repeat it just because I don't think they can hear you. So Wi-Fi Direct, the API to be a server for other phones to connect or to effectively create a soft access point is Ice Cream Sandwich. But once you've created that server, you can then connect to it through legacy devices like Android phones running earlier versions. So that might be a useful solution. But you still need to have one phone at least that's running ICS.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, let's have a look. What's the next question on the moderator? Scenic from Boston says, is there an official guideline to the number of nested views one can have in their view hierarchy for the different versions starting at
One? Was it?
One
I think we
suggestion.
agreed on two. Yeah, compromise thing.
To directly answer the question, there is no guideline. In practice, what I've found is that if you have more than 10 or 12 levels of nested views, you are asking for trouble. So that's a good starting point. But as always, when it comes to performance, you have to use the trace view tool or hierarchy viewer to profile your application. That's the only way to know whether you're doing something wrong. Because you can have an application with a lot of nested views that will perform just fine, and you could have an application with just a few nested views that has terrible performance. So in general, like 10 levels maybe, and in practice, use the profiling tools.
I'd add a couple of things to that. The other tool that Romain didn't mention because he's so modest is layout opt. Layout?
No, it's called links.
Right. So there's originally a tool prior to the latest SDK release called layout opt that will actually point out problems in your layout hierarchy, including nesting issues that you can actually optimize. And that's all bundled into a new tool in the SDK called lint, which gives you that warning as well as other useful warnings. The other thing I'll point out is there's a new layout class in Ice Cream Sandwich called grid layout, and it's there specifically to help reduce nesting because it allows you to have a much more flexible layout system so that you don't have to go to these deeply nested levels to get the layout that you want.
And speaking of grid layout, it's easy to backport to previous versions of Android, so you can go take a look at the source code and just copy and paste it in your app. And I know that at least a couple of different persons have backported grid layout as a jar file all the way back to Cupcake, I believe. So you don't need Ice Cream Sandwich to use grid layout. You can just copy it in your app.
Nice. That's a good tip, actually. It's something which someone else mentioned, and I reshared on Google Plus the other day, which is if you see cool things in new versions of Android, you can totally steal them, copy the source, and put it in your own app.
Right. So for example, there's Dan's work on the download manager.
Yes.
Yeah. So Dan Galpin, one of our advocates, took the download manager code from, I believe it was Gingerbread, and backported it all the way back to Android 1.6 with only a couple changes. So
nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's definitely an opportunity there. If there's stuff which, so I always tell people when you're developing to write your code against the newest version of Android. There's a bunch of important reasons to do that, but one of the less obvious ones is if there is stuff which is really important to your app and the framework stuff only exists in later versions, you can often backport that yourself and have support for, conceivably all the way back to 1.6.
Yeah, not always, because then it depends on the dependencies that code has on other parts of the framework. So that certainly works for grid layout. There's other things where the nesting is just too deep with other new features in the framework, but it can work.
Let's see. I think we've got a couple of new people on the live hangout as well. Does anyone want to throw us a question from live? Nope. Okay, we'll move on to the next moderator question. We're buzzing through these. You guys are really efficient question answerers. We usually get through about 5.
We're used to it. Or maybe we're giving shitty answers.
Let's go with the former. Don't know. There are several. So this is from Shalom in Salt Lake City, Utah. There are several backwards compatibility libraries coming out like action bars and viewed pager indicators. Are there plans for keeping the compatibility up to date at a faster rate? So I presume this is so that other people don't have to release their own compatibility.
I mean, we're going to improve the compatibility library as fast as we can, as often as we can. But we have a different philosophy on APIs than you might have. So it will always be slightly different from what you want or what everybody wants. So I think it's great that people create their own versions. The compatibility library is just a library, so it doesn't have to be the same for everybody, and that's also why it's open source. You can modify it. We just have a reference compatibility library. If you have feature requests, you can file them at b.android.com, and we'll take a look at it. But in the meantime, if there's something you need and we're not doing, by any means, create your own version. That's what it's for.
Excellent. We've got one on OpenGL ES. Will the emulator, well, I guess it's more of an emulator question in fairness, will the emulator ever support OpenGL ES beyond 1.0, even if it means at 0.1 FPS or less? it'd still be majorly useful.
The answer is yes.
Will it be at 0.1 or?
No, and it will be fast. So there was a demo of the emulator running OpenGL on your desktop at Google I/O. So the emulator guys are still working on it. I've seen demos of it. It's pretty awesome. You can run like games using your graphics card on your desktop. And as part of it, I believe that there will be support for OpenGL ES2. So there will be a way for you to test your game or your OpenGL ES2 application on the emulator. So yeah.
Yes,
it's going to be exciting.
Yes, it's going to come and it's going to be awesome. Okay, before I move on to the next question, a slight bit of administrative stuff. So we unfortunately don't have a great way of tracking analytics in terms of how many of you guys are watching at home. It could be 4 people for all we know. So if I could ask, if you are watching the stream and you want to see more of these in the future, if you could just +1 the live stream post so that we know you were here, that would be awesome. Back to the questions. I see that the action bar added support in Ice Cream Sandwich for setting an icon. Will support be added in the future to change the title font size and color on the fly?
I'm trying to check because I know he has no idea on how to answer this question. I don't know. I have no idea. Maybe, possibly. But the thing is, with the action bar, you can always have your own custom view inside the action bar.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's my gut feeling says it's pretty unlikely because you can do it yourself.
Yeah, you can do it yourself. So, I mean, the basic APIs we have, if you use them, we guarantee you that you're going to look and feel like all the other Android apps on the system. If you want to do something completely, something fancy, then use a custom view.
Yeah, it relates to something we were saying before about being consistent. I think our emphasis is going to make sure that our UI and the basic UIs that we provide to you are consistent system-wide. And so spending a lot of time enhancing the APIs so that you could then go ahead and customize them to look different, probably not the best use of resources, because I think consistency is probably more important. But there's at least enough hooks like creating custom views that you can certainly do it if you want to. If you think that's the right solution, go for it.
Absolutely. I think that touches on sort of a broader philosophical point around Android development is that for the most part, you're able to do pretty much anything you want and make things look however you want. And that can be a good thing, but I would like to urge you to think twice before you do customize something that is a pretty consistent system-wide attribute, just because it makes it much harder for people to use your app and understand how it's supposed to work if you're overriding sort of these default system behaviors. So do with caution would be my guidance.
That's a good point.
What does it make the wise features possible and make the stupid ones? No, wise features easy and make the stupid possible.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So another question from Shalom in Salt Lake City. It says color shades / schemes can look quite different depending on the device.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know of any color calibration techniques or guidelines for solving this issue?
So I like this question because I take a lot of photos and you have the exact same issue when you deal with photos. I mean, it's an issue that everybody works with color on, computers, TVs, anything that has a display, you will have this problem. And the only way to solve this issue is if everybody's display is correctly calibrated, including the display that you use to do your development. And then sometimes there are just slight variations in the software that does the calibration or that interprets the profiles. So the best answer I can give you is let it go. It's okay. Things will look a little different.
How's that working out for you?
I feel a lot better now that I've let it go.
Excellent.
It's a very difficult problem. So it's and to give you a better answer, like it's something that we've been thinking about for a while, and I would love to have a way to support like some sort of color profiling. Maybe the devices will be color profiled in factory. But so at least I would like the system itself to be able to interpret the color profile on images. But then you need to go further than that. You need to be able to color profile any color that's displayed by the system. And it's not an easy problem to solve. So currently, today, there's nothing you can do really. But in the future, hopefully, there will be a solution.
So for now, let it go?
Yeah, let it go.
Use black and white.
How do you feel about grayscale?
Grayscale, 5 grades.
5?
Just 5.
Just 5, yeah.
After that, it gets a little dicey.
Otherwise, you lose the banding and you end up with.
That's true.
That's no good. Let's see. We had a couple of people join and then leave, so I guess we'll stick to the moderator questions for now. Do you have any development activity in the field of motion gestures recognition? So using the built-in accelerometers in particular. Apparently there's work on that in iOS and a bunch of third-party libraries like Wii, which I haven't heard of, but nonetheless provide this sort of thing. So
Wii?
I think Wii as in like a Wii maybe?
Yeah,
G?
I don't know how to pronounce that.
I'm not sure. What do you know? Is there anything you know of less UI, more UX?
I don't know anything about motion gesture recognition. I know it's not easy. I tried. I have no idea. Chet?
I worked on curved motion for animations.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't relate at all. No, I have no opinion.
All right, I will see if we can find someone from the sensors team to come and answer some questions at some point. They may be better placed to answer that. What are some rules of thumb in deciding between the different holo themes, holo light, action bar, those sorts of things for a particular app?
So I don't think that we have specific guidelines for external applications. I think it's really up to you and the kind of theme that would look best in your app. If you look at ICS, you can find a pattern in the system apps, and you'll notice that we use the dark theme for media applications. So video player, camera app, gallery, those use the black theme. What we call the system apps, like the settings, they also use the dark theme. And the white theme is pretty much everything else. I don't know when you will use the dark action bar. That would be a good question, I think, for our UI designers, like they might have an answer.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely something I want to do is bring the some people from the UX and design team in to answer some of those sorts of questions, which I think would be really valuable. We've got an animation question, which I think we've just been saving up for Chet. So this person is Karsten from Copenhagen. Is shrinking a list fragment's width using an object animator to make room for another fragment. It works, but the list fragment is continually being laid out while it's animating, presumably because he's changing the width, which causes jerky animations. How can you get smoother animation or disable the layout?
So there's an inherent problem here.
Don't do layouts.
Pulls in all kinds of issues. One is that layout is expensive, layout of text items especially so. And the more complicated, the more expensive it is. One of the things you try to do in animations is avoid expensive things like layout and garbage collection because they tend to create awful animations. So for instance, the layout transition class goes out of its way to make sure that layout doesn't run while it's running. It will sort of snapshot the before and after dimensions of an object, animate those dimensions without causing layout, and then get to the end and do a real layout, make sure everything's in the right place. Having said that, it's a little bit hard to animate something with text inside it, especially if it's wrapped text, without doing a layout, because otherwise it's not going to be in the right place. You also will not get a good representation if you do a scale instead of an actual full layout changing the dimensions, because text that's scaled looks, what's the word, awful. And not only does it look awful while it's being scaled, but it will not look the same when you end the animation as it does when you get to the end and then snap to the real text. There are workarounds for this. There is no clear answer here, especially since we are on constrained devices where performance really counts and you don't want your animations to suck. One of the workarounds was actually in one of the demos that you had in this awesome book, where you can actually fade out text, animate an object without the text in it. That at least gives the user an indication of what's going on in the UI without the artifacts that I was talking about with the text, and then when the animation is done, you can fade the text back in. That will give you the performance you need, it'll give you the UI indication that you need, and it'll avoid a lot of the artifacts along the way. Other than that, there's not really a good answer here.
Okay. What about so what he's doing here in principle, because it's something which I've had a look at as well. I'd be interested to know your opinion. Is it good practice to be doing this, like to be animating your layouts by effectively changing the layout widths?
So in an ideal world, yes.
Yeah.
If the device was fast enough to handle that case, that would be great. But you can tell, like even on desktop, sometimes when you resize a window, like it stirs a little bit because it's a lot of work to redo the layout. So usually In those situations, we use tricks. Instead of changing the width, we apply a scale factor, so it will compress your text in your images. But usually what happens at the same time, we try to move that object out of the view, or we try to fade it, or we cover it with something else. There's a lot of visual tricks you can play to hide what's going on. And if you keep the animations really, really fast, then user understands what's going on, but you don't have time to see these artifacts like scaling and compressing. So it really depends on the UI and the type of animation you're looking for. But in practice, yeah, trying to relay out on every frame is not going to work really.
Right. So actually, one of the places where you can see this sort of workaround trick is when we crossfade between activities. You'll see a little squish animation. If it was a full squish from 0 to end, it wouldn't look that great, and it would take way too long. So all we do is do a little scale at the end. So it's fast, and it's too slight for you to actually see the artifacts that would be more noticeable. So there are things that you can do there. If you're animating a view from fully on screen to mostly on screen, and it's got a lot of text in it, there's not really a good solution if you want to animate the dimensions of that thing. That's not going to show up some sort of.
Can you hide that view while animating?
Pardon me?
Can you hide the view while animating?
You can certainly hide the view, but then why are you animating it?
No, in the sense you can replace it with some kind of frame or something. So you don't have the whole view. You have just the boundary of it, and it animates.
Yeah, that's the kind of workaround that I was talking about, where you can fade out the text. Similarly, yeah, you can simply replace it with another view that is simply the background of the view. Right. Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of things that you can do to work around the issue. There's not really a good, correct solution for it. It's more like whatever works in your application and looks good enough.
Yeah, I actually found, when trying to do similar things, that as soon as you had a layout which was even marginally complicated, there was obviously the speed implications, the performance, but also scaling something smaller only works up until a certain point, and then stuff doesn't fit. So the text is going to wrap like a letter per line, and the buttons are going to get compressed, and things are going to look wrong.
Yeah, and also when you do that, usually you end up with so many things moving on screen because you see the text reflowing, the images rescaling, that it might be confusing for the user, when too much happens.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you don't need, well, let me put this a different way. You're not going to need the thing being animated to be interactive. So if it's not being interactive, you don't need real controls. So it's a good opportunity to try and do something clever, replace it with something which is representative rather than accurate.
And another workaround I've seen in some situations is you can also crossfade between different representations. So if you're going to have a snap at the end of an animation where you go between the way that it looks during a scaling animation and the way that it actually is with real laid out text, then you can actually have a crossfade animation of those two representations at the end, and it hides a lot of that artifact from the user.
Another OpenGL question. I had been learning OpenGL, or about OpenGL, and using sprite sheets. I guess it doesn't make sense to use it with Android APIs like ImageView, but I can't explain why. Does Android use OpenGL to draw its views? How does the view hierarchy get drawn?
So we gave a partial answer to this.
Yeah, but to answer the question, how does the view hierarchy get drawn? So it's going to take the next 2 hours.
It's a really quick one. If you could just cover it.
More seriously. So if you run on Android 3.0 or higher, we can draw the view hierarchy using OpenGL, in which case it does help if you use a sprite sheet. If you're running on previous versions of Android, or your application explicitly states that it wants software rendering, then using a sprite sheet doesn't give you any benefit whatsoever in software. You can use a sprite sheet with the ImageView, so you can have just a giant bitmap, and I think you can specify a transform on the drawable that you use in ImageView. There's a matrix you can supply to indicate what part of the giant bitmap you want to show. That would definitely help performance when running with OpenGL.
I think it depends on the application, though. If you
I wouldn't worry too much about it.
It seems like a very low-level optimization. I'm not sure that's where your application is going to be bogging down.
Yeah, and as always, I mean, if it's not a performance problem, don't bother. So profile your application and try to optimize when it becomes an issue.
On the how does the view hierarchy get drawn and do we use hardware acceleration, we gave a talk at Google I/O in 2011 that covers that exact territory. So if you wonder more about how all that stuff works, then go check it out on YouTube.
That was the short version, which took an hour to explain.
Yeah,
That's right.
Well,
Yeah.
because it explains only the hardware version of the.
It was going to be Android rendering, but then we only had an hour, so we called it accelerated Android rendering, so that it only took an hour.
Excellent, excellent. And it's in contention for the long version to be day 3 of Google
Yes.
I/O. Excellent. This is an NFC question, so I'm going to
Skip. Is
it.
there a way to put this option in
There may be an action bar related question in there.
Yeah, it's unclear to me what it
We'll
means,
integrate
what it
these
is.
two.
So.
Yeah, okay, so I can answer this. So, sorry, the question is, if I want to build an app which has NFC, can I do so on an app that works from Android 2.1 with ICS and an action bar, for where it's supported? And the answer is yes. So you don't have to have 2 apps. You can, because of the way Android works, it's all backwards and forwards compatible. If all you need to do is check what version of the framework is running on the device that you're running. And use things like interfaces to make sure that you're not trying to instantiate NFC objects on a platform where those classes...
Or even in that case, like when you're loading a menu, if all you want is make a menu item disappear, you can use version numbers in the resources directory, so you can have menu-v11, for instance.
Precisely, yeah, you can absolutely just have different menu XML definitions based on the platform version, and then the action bar stuff will take care of that and render it appropriately depending on the platform version. So, yes, definitely doable. Let's see, we answered this one already. Android at home is not you guys. Will there be better UI design tools in the future? The designer currently integrated in Eclipse is not very user-friendly in Kopfi's opinion. Does not have many of the features and even shows some things different than if they would be rendered on an Android device. And this is more a tools question, and I'm going to hopefully get to
well, I mean, we have the tool in Eclipse, and we have people working on it, like right now, this very minute, improving it. They're making great progress. If you've seen ADT 16, 15, 14, there have been a number of really good improvements. As far as the rendering goes, so the rendering will always be a little different between a device and Eclipse, and that's because Eclipse runs the actual framework code on your computer, but it uses I believe Java to do the rendering. So it will not be pixel perfect, but it will be very, very close. And again, it's not there so that you can have like perfect results. It's just so that you can quickly test your layouts in different resolutions without going to the emulator. But yeah, we have people working on it and making good progress.
Cool. So that's pretty much all of the questions
Hey, I like that.
on,
I like that last step.
When will
That last
the
question.
Filthy Rich Android Apps book come out?
Did you post that one?
No, I did not, but it's been downvoted by many people. So,
Ouch. So yeah, I guess hopefully coming out soon. We'll have to check Amazon.
Oh, there's a new question.
There is a new question. So yeah, if there's anyone watching, there's a moderator link. So if you do have more questions, we have a little bit more time. So please do throw them in. Nick, who is at the third row from the front, asks, at any time, is there any time frame for when Neon JIT support will be coming to RenderScript?
So the good news is we have Neon support for RenderScript working already here in our office. So there's no time frame, no ETA, but it's a solved problem. So a future update of Android will add this support.
Excellent. Nice piece of news. All right, so that's all of the moderator questions. Is there anyone online who has a question they would like to ask?
Hey, I do have a question.
Please.
I'm getting this class not found exceptions suddenly. It's happening only since the past few days. I did not change my app, and I'm only seeing those exceptions from the market.
What class is not found?
It's my starting class called Splash, and it's just extending the activity class.
So it's your own class that's not found, right?
Yes.
Then I have no idea what's going on.
And it only happens on few devices, I guess, because it's not happening on any of my text devices or any of the users that I asked them to test.
I think I've seen people online ask a similar question, but I don't remember what the answer was. You should take a look on Stack Overflow or on the Android-developers Google group. I know that a few people there have had the same issue or similar issue, so they might be able to help you.
Okay.
Just offhand, I don't know what's going on.
Okay, thank you. And I have another little question.
Sure.
I saw Romain and Chet has a demonstrating at the conferences and on their Nexus phones, and they were using the HDMI cable to display the device in the portrait mode also. But I can only display it in my landscape mode. How did you guys do it in the portrait mode?
Really, if you give us your presentation sequence.
It's a hack. It requires, I believe it requires root access, and it's undocumented API that you access through the shell. It's not supported, so there's no guarantee it would work tomorrow or even on another device than Galaxy Nexus. So HDMI output currently is landscape only.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so I think that just about covers the questions.
I think someone's maybe asking a question.
Someone is typing. I don't
Doesn't
have a
have a
mic.
mic.
That's all right. Did you guys try to do a layout calculation in separate thread against first layout lag problem? What do you think about it?
So I don't know what the first layout lag problem is, but
we can't draw until we know how things are laid out.
exactly. So if we move the layout to a separate thread, we would have to wait for that thread, and then the lag would still be there. So it doesn't sound like a good idea.
Multi-threading tends to be proposed as a solution to a lot of problems, and you end up creating more problems. It's not saying that there's not reasons to go to a separate thread, even especially when there's multiple cores sitting around. But there are some things that are inherently serial in nature. So spawning off a separate thread complicates the code, complicates the logic, and in this case doesn't solve anything.
Well, it says, so what if you get the data later? For example, you load feed from Facebook. I mean, you can already do that. Like, data loading and processing should happen on the background thread. And if your layout phase, and I'm talking about really doing like view.layout takes too much time, then you should optimize the app, because again, like we would have to wait for layout to be done to be able to re-render. So there would still be some lag for the user.
Also, layout touches views in many different ways, as does drawing, and you can't separate a piece of that out and make it available from a different thread. All the manipulation of view properties has to happen on the same thread. You couldn't say, well, layout can change these properties, and drawing is going to access these other properties over here. Instead, they all have access to the inherent properties of views, and you need to keep that on a single thread to actually make sure the right things happen and data doesn't get clobbered.
Yeah, I've seen far too many times in my previous life as a WinForms developer, people figuring, oh, it needs to go faster. Make more threads.
Yes.
Well, and also a big problem with threading is it's very, very difficult to backport threading, multi-threading into an existing system. So let's say that we did multi-threading for layouts. The problem is, there are, for instance, protected fields that you can access if you subclass a layout. So if we had another thread doing layout, we would have to probably have a lock around when we access that field. But if there's already an app that's accessing that field and was not multi-threaded before, then it would have to be rewritten to use the lock. And so there are many, many complications. And honestly, like layouts can be a performance issue if you're animating a layout, if you're changing or doing a relayout on every frame of an animation. But usually it shouldn't be a bottleneck in your application. And then there's another question about pre-caching.
Yes, I think Brian's suggesting that you effectively create and inflate the layout of a view in the background and then
so
onto the main
inflating views on a non-UI thread, is it possible? I've been working on the UI toolkit for years, and I will tell you that I don't know. It probably will work, but someday it will break. What I can tell you is that do not do that, because every time someone says it works, I would say it doesn't really.
Just because it doesn't cause a runtime exception doesn't mean it works.
Yeah, I mean, all the code we write for the UI toolkit assumes that we're running on the UI thread. So it might work, but suddenly it might break with a new update, or you're calling another API, or so. Especially with multiple cores now that we have on devices, like threading issues happen much more often.
Yeah, I have to say from my own history in programming. Not all programming languages have always thrown runtime exceptions when you try and touch the UI from a background thread. Often it just does something unpredictable.
Yeah.
So it looks like it works. As far as you're concerned, you've done something, the UI updates, and on your single core home PC or emulator or Nexus, whatever, it all just works. And then you start deploying it, and things start to go horribly wrong in an entirely unpredictable way. Like the thoughts of
it's hard to reproduce.
To reproduce. It's always some sort of weird race condition, and more often than not, it's not as simple as, oh, the UI doesn't update the way you were expecting it to. Like something else will break completely. There'll be some sort of weird memory corruption or whatever else. So, yeah.
Yeah, so Damien is saying that he wants to measure widgets from a background thread. So you're gonna have problems because, again, like the code that's behind measure or even the constructors of views will touch, properties. They will call other APIs that do assume that they're called on the UI thread. So you might end up with real behavior someday on someone's device, and you will never be able to reproduce it easily. And there's a question about, does it apply to async tasks doing background? Yeah, same thing. Doing background is a separate thread, so you should not touch the UI from doing background. And that's the whole point of async tasks, is we give you the pre-execute and the post-execute where you can do UI stuff, and doing background, you don't do UI stuff. Yeah, it's dangerous. And like I said, like it looks like it works, and it might work for the next 5 years, or it might break, like in 2 hours. And there's no way to know.
And the answer to Krishna's question is yes, that does apply to editing from async tasks doing background method. That's kind of the whole point of the async task, is that it does the UI thread synchronization for you when you aren't in the background anymore.
Yeah, it wasn't meant to take UI thread work off the UI thread.
No, indeed.
5 years Android will still be there? Well, I hope so.
Yeah, well, this we know for sure. Because it's an open source project, in 5 years, Android will definitely still be there. And I think we all sincerely hope that it'll still be here as well.
It's 2012.
We'll see. I've got Arthur typing.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Sorry, I don't know to cut somebody else off, but this is not so technical, but can we actually get Galaxy Nexus phones, the developer version that aren't tied to Verizon at this point, or will those be made available as developer phones soon?
I mean, well, we don't really have developer phones since Nexus 1, because now you can unlock them.
Yes, we haven't really. So we originally had the developer phone with the G1, and I think we eventually had the Magic.
Yeah,
and
that was
the Ion device, when we gave away at I/O the first year, and then Nexus 1. I think are the 3 phones we've ever had as developer phones. It's always been really tricky because the new versions of those phones have come out so much later than they're released with the carriers that if you wanted one, you could have gotten it somewhere else. So I don't know for certain. I'm guessing that there may be something in future, but I wouldn't.
Yeah, well, I think the problem is if you're in the US, because there's only the CDMA version. Because if you go to Europe and you buy the GSM Galaxy Nexus, that's basically what the developer phones were. You can unlock the bootloader. It's not SIM-locked.
That's true.
So, I mean, all the Nexus phones really are developer phones now.
I have another meeting.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Okay.
And just one last question. So for Brian to split, okay, like a jet split pane, I would say write a custom view.
So just to repeat it really quickly, you'd like to have the window split into 2 views and have a grab handle that lets the user resize the views by touching and dragging on a pre-3.0 device. Do you have any recommendations as the best way to do that? Yeah, it's going to be a custom view.
Well, but then, my answer is pretty much always like write a custom view.
Yeah. In terms of any specific recommendations around how you would build that custom view, it's probably too long an answer.
Yeah, I would say probably go take a look at the source code of ScoreView. That would be a great example of how to handle the touch events.
Yeah, the source code of what?
ScoreView.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does it also get into layout issues?
Yeah, don't do the layout on every touch event. Don't do
more that the DevOps talk that you gave.
Yeah, that's a good point. I gave a talk at DevOps 2010, so if you go to parleys.com, so it's PARLEYS.com, I gave a talk on how to create custom layouts. It explains everything on how to handle measurement layouts, the children drawing, all that stuff. So that would help you do that kind of custom component.
All right, that's just after 3 o'clock. So thank you everyone who joined us in the live hangout and everyone watching online. Special thanks to Romain for joining us here. Thanks, and yeah, hopefully we'll see everyone again soon.
See you next time.
See ya.